Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jenelle Riley from Variety. Before we're joined by our guest today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA members. This conversation today is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given nearly $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. So if you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and you need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce actor Andrew Garfield of Tick, Tick, Boom. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. And what a wonderful introduction. So I'm just deeply moved by, the amount of service and assistance that the organization has been giving actors these last two. I just found it's just so touching. Thank God. So yeah, thank you for that intro. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I've met some people who have been helped by the emergency assistance, and I get actually really emotional talking to them. Yeah. I think it's it's a frustrating time for everybody, but especially performers. We want to be performing.
Yeah, indeed, and I think we all felt it right at the beginning of lockdown and the beginning of the pandemic, and that description of essential worker kind of was doing a number on all of us, I think, in a psychological way. And my brother's a doctor, and he was the essential worker of the last 2 years. He's a lung doctor, for that matter, so he's been on the front lines of this. So that was obviously, I'm so grateful that he exists and people like him exist. But the people with SAG-AFTRA cards are the people that give my brother comfort and a kind of a soothing at the end of his long shifts. So we all need each other, and he would argue that SAG-AFTRA members are also essential. So it's really, it's sweet.
I actually didn't know that about your brother. I mean, is he impressed by everything you've done? Or is he just like, I held a man's heart in my hands today?
Yeah, pretty much. No, I think we have a real mutual respect for each other that's developed over the years now that we're of age. I think thankfully we've created a relationship that's very loving and very, as I said, mutually respectful. Like, I could never do what he does, and he could never do what I do, and there's a kind of mutual admiration there. I think it's much easier for me to admire him, though, because what he does is so tangible in terms of its life and death what he does is literally saving lives. And I would argue that art saves lives. Art has saved my life. Story has saved my life, but in the most visceral, physical way. He is acting in a heroic way every day, and I'm just so appreciative of him.
To sort of bring this to Tick, Tick, Boom, it reminds me, one of the things that I love about this movie is you have this character, Scott from Finance, who is not an artist himself, but the movie doesn't make fun of him. It's like, we need those people who are good at what they do, but love the arts and show up for people's shows.
Without Scott from Finance, people like John Larson and their work maybe wouldn't get any life. We need Scott from Finance to provide the finance for undiscovered artists to come into the world. That's the way the culture is set up right now. And yeah, it doesn't mean this film, musical theater people are pretty wonderful. They don't tend to make fun of anyone in bad faith or in bad humor. If there's any ribbing or making fun of, it's only like, you feel, it's more like when a drag queen makes fun of you. You love it. You love every second of it. It feels like a kiss. It's always with love. That's my experience of being jumped into this particular musical theater community with these actors that I got to work with, and with Lynn. It's the most loving tribe that I could ever hope to have been introduced to.
Yeah. And you are speaking to your fellow SAG-AFTRA actors right now. And I actually usually like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG card?
How did I get my SAG card? That's a really good question, because I obviously started working. Yes, and hello, SAG actors. I'm very, very excited to be talking to you guys about this particular film, because I feel like this is, John's story is all of our stories in this particular virtual room. If we do have a SAG membership, we know the struggles, we know the rejection, we know the doubt, we know the temptation to give up in the face of countless failures, and yet we're still here, called and driven and pulled by some mysterious force that tells us to act, that tells us to make stories, that tells us to write, that tells us to direct, and it's this inescapable divine dissatisfaction that we have to live into for the rest of our lives. So I'm very, very happy to be a part of this club with you all, and I really hope you responded to the film like I did from reading the script. I don't remember. I mean, because I have an equity. I got an equity card when I had my first gig in the UK, and I think what was the first time I got my SAG card? The first project I did out here is insane to say, but it was a Robert Redford movie, and I think that's when I got my SAG card. It was Redford and myself. It was a film called Lions for Lambs, and it was like, so I had just been doing theatre in the UK, and then suddenly I'm on my first call sheet, and I'm number 4 on the call sheet, and number 1 is Robert Redford, number 2 is Meryl Streep, number 3 is Tom Cruise, and then number 4 is like this child from the theatre of the UK, and I was kind of ruined from then on, and I had no idea how that happened or how I got there. I remember taking a picture of, the cast photos that were like lining the wall of the production office and like sending it to my mum and dad, going, "How is this real? Is this real?" And it was, and I can't quite believe I get to be here even talking to you now, because I know I never take it for granted how lucky I am just to work as an actor. Like I just. And going back to John and his story, it's he was someone that woke up every morning, and in the face of all of that terror, rejection, and doubt, decided to play anyway, decided to sing and write anyway, much like Van Gogh, who woke up every morning in the face of people misunderstanding his work or rejecting his work, but thank God, or whatever your higher power is, that he decided to wake up every morning and paint, because he's left the world a richer place for us. He didn't get to harvest any of it while he was alive, and neither did John, as we know, him dying at the age of 35 on the eve before the first preview of Rent off Broadway, in the strange synchronicitous twist of fate. He didn't get to reap any of the reward, but he was doing it just to do it. He was doing it just because he needed to offer his gift and bring his gift fully into the world. And I think that's something that we all in this room share, that weird desire.
Yeah. And obviously Tick, Tick, Boom is very autobiographical. And I still can't believe this, but it marks the film directing debut of Lin-Manuel Miranda. For some reason, it just feels so accomplished, like it's his 100th movie. Did you know Lin prior to this movie? And how did he approach you about playing the role?
I didn't know Lin. I had met him very briefly. I had admired him from afar, and I had seen, obviously had seen Hamilton. I was aware of all of his other work, and I met him at a party very briefly, and we kind of had a hug, and we kind of had immediate kind of kinship and a respect for each other. And then, and I agree that this doesn't feel like a directorial debut in any way, shape, or form. It didn't feel that way on set. It was the most joyful set I've ever been on. That's very hard to achieve, whether you're even as an old pro, to create an environment where everyone wants to be present and everyone wants to give their best work and everyone wants to collaborate. Like being in a very friendly playground, I found it to be very, very moving. And he has this other strange thing that he shares with the other kind of older master directors that I've worked with, which is a confidence in being a proper collaborator. Like, it's so, because usually when someone's new to a job, there's a fear, there's an insecurity, there's a kind of, and that can result in some control, like a need to control and micromanage everything. Whereas Lin, I don't know, he had this ability to bring the best out of you and allow you to flourish, thrive, and offer your deepest talents. And I know that's what we all want as actors, is to be trusted, to be kind of given the space to allow ourselves to express ourselves to our potential. And Lin is one of those people that just kind of offers that on a platter. And then when I first heard about this project, all I knew was that Lynn wanted to talk to me about something, and that it involved singing and dancing. And I was very excited and terrified, because I've never sung and nor danced on screen, and I've never had a training in either. And the dancing is, you know, a little less demanding in this than the singing, but still demanding enough for a non-dancer, non-singer. And so when he spoke to me about it, it was an immediate yes, even before I knew what it was, because I knew that if Lynn wanted to do something, I knew it was going to be incredibly ambitious, um, you know, a kind of soulful storytelling in some respect, deeply emotional. I knew it was going to be hitting the buttons that I want to hit while I'm making work. I want it to be an offering of healing for an audience, and I want it to be an adventure, and I want it to be something that is a full meal for an audience. And for me as an actor, I know that's how I like the environment I like to be in. But then, so I kind of said yes even before I knew what he wanted to do. And then he slid across. We met each other for lunch, and he slid across the music and lyrics for Tick Tick Boom with a little note in the front saying, "This won't make sense to you now, but I promise you it will. Siempre Lynn." And no truer words have ever been written, because it didn't. I didn't know the musical. I knew Rent, but I didn't know Tick Tick Boom. And as I started to dive into it and look at who Jonathan was, I felt like I was being reintroduced to a long lost brother that I didn't know existed previously. It was that kind of deep bone resonance that I felt with John, and a kind of an immediate longing to honor him, an immediate longing to give him more life, because he was taken far too early. And an immediate kind of desire to wake up every morning and devote myself at the altar of John and all that he stood for, because he stood for the greatest of our human values. He stood for community. He was a revolutionary artist. He stood for, you know, everyone having an innate, inborn human dignity. And I think this was kind of, he was brought to this understanding and brought to this ethical viewpoint of humanity and of the world via this terrible period of time that he was living through with all of his artistic community of the AIDS epidemic, and seeing how his friends, his community, being treated like second-class citizens who did not deserve to have the care and protection that that is their birthright. It is all of our birthrights as human beings. And he had no choice but to become an advocate for everything that he was living through, and all of the loss that everyone was experiencing at the time. And the only way he could be an advocate, the most effective way he could be an advocate, was through his gifts, was through the piano and his songwriting and his lyrics. And when he sung to the back row of the galaxy. He sung as if it was life and death, because he was singing to save lives, in the same way that any ACT UP activist would have stormed, the Bethesda, research center for, drug development. He was doing that with his voice, with his music, longing for the world to hear and to wake up. And I immediately just thought, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. What a way to spend the day. I want to spend my time only in this way, devoted to stories like this, worthy stories like this, stories, stories about people that we can look to for how to live. And I feel that way about John.
I promise not to harp on this too much, because I know it's been discussed ad nauseum, but you hadn't sang prior to this film. Now, when you say you hadn't sang, do you mean ever? You never did a musical in high school? Did you do karaoke? Like, where did you start from? Because you ended up becoming so good. I just want to know what like the learning curve was.
Well, that's very kind of you. I obviously at drama school, I did voice classes, but the singing strand was very minor and I failed at it miserably. I was given a song from Sweet Charity, The Rhythm of Life.
Love that song.
Which is like impossible to breathe in. And I ended up having a semi-panic attack during our kind of like exam. And it was a mess. It was like, all of my friends with drama school can attest to this. And then I kind of like shut off that valve. I was like, okay, that's not for me. I don't think I need to go there. But I'm not tone deaf, and that was useful. And then, you know, vocally, I think I borrowed lots of Lin's confidence because he had seen me doing Angels in America, which is, as we know, a long 8.5 hour slog up a mountain and then some. And you as Prior, Walter, and every character in that play, you're vocally traveling all around the human experience. And so he saw that, and he thought, well, if he can get there for that, then if he understands pitch to a degree, then I can give him the time and the resources to get there. And that's what he did. He set me up with an amazing vocal coach, Liz Kaplan. And then I had all this time, which I know is a luxury. I had a whole year to get ready for this, and to get because it was important to me and to Lynn, to all of us, that I got to the place of confidence in my own instrument where I could sing like John sang, not in the sense of the sound that he made, but in the sense of the passion that he sang with, performed with. Because again, he was singing for people's lives. He was singing for his own life, and he was, you know, it was every cell. And again, this is where it gets very touching for me, is that I think because it's in the title, the ticking, this tick, tick, time is running out for all of us. And I think he had an acute awareness of that, in terms of not only the people that were, you know, getting sick from the AIDS epidemic and dying around him, but also I think he felt it internally. He felt this internal, I don't know why, but I just feel like my heart might explode, which it did at the age of 35. So this terrible tragedy gave this unconscious awareness, I think, that he didn't have a lot of time for whatever mysterious reason, gave him this impulse and this impetus to sing as if he had no time, and to write like he was running out of time, to quote another great musical. And I find that deeply moving, because we all do leave here with a half finished song, if we're lucky, a half finished song. And so the question is, it's really moving to me, because it's just the truth. Like, how are we going to spend our time? How are we going to spend our time in the most meaningful way? And that's why one of my favorite scenes in the film is the song Why, and being John at the Delacorte, and going through that whole process of trying to figure out that through that improvised song, how to meet this moment of losing his best friend. And he realizes he has no choice but to carry on creating in the way that he's creating. But it shifts in that moment. It stops being about, it becomes less narrow, his creativity. It becomes about, oh, I need to do it for my friend. I need to be his advocate through my music. And I think that Rent starts to crystallize in that moment, while John is going through the ultimate heartbreak of potentially losing his heart, the best friend he has in the world.
I really want to go to karaoke with you and have you do The Rhythm of Life Now, because that is a cruel song. I love that song, but that is hard for anyone. And to give that to you as a test, that feels like they set you up for failure there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they did. They really created a lot of fear and lack of belief in myself. No, it was, come on. I take full responsibility. It was just not, it was not happening that day.
It's just weird. It's so random. I was listening to Sammy Davis Jr. sing it on the film soundtrack like a week ago. Cool. Yeah, and talk about how he kept running out of breath. So if that's happening to Sammy Davis Jr., that's not fair to do to a student. I'm curious how else you prepared for the role, because I'm sure you were able to speak to people who knew Jonathan. His sister, Julie, is an executive producer, but who else did you talk to that kind of helped inform the performance?
Yeah, Julie was a big resource and a generous one. And she just was so, I don't know, she was also the spiritual kind of tie to John. You know, when she was on set, it was the closest living ancestor of John, you know, and we could feel him through her. And with her eyes on the monitor, we felt weirdly safe, scared, terrified, because you want to make sure that we're doing justice to, you know, her brother. But she's such a kind, loving person. It's like, I'm just so grateful that she was around and continues to be. There was people lining up around the block to talk about John, his grocery store clerk, the person that lost their virginity to him, like his best friends, the backup singers, like everyone was longing to talk about John. And everyone all the different cameos that came through set, everyone was so, I would just get so much more and more insight. Yeah, so there was a lot of that. There was a lot of footage of John. There was footage of him obviously doing Boho Days, the one-man rock monologue that later turned into Tick Tick Boom. And then, there was footage of him from home movies. There was footage of him in the diner. There was footage of him, he was filming his own apartment for a potential insurance claim, and then like we had images of his cassette collection, his book collection, his, his record collection, like all of these things I could just immerse myself in for a year. So to the point where I think as actors, what we long for is feeling confident and comfortable enough in the skin of the character and in our own skin to be able to get onto set and be alive and be present and listen and be spontaneous and let go and get out of the way, trust that we have built this kind of new foundation in ourselves of this character that we're playing, or found the parts of us that align with the character, and maybe reach deeper into the parts of us that we didn't know existed, that will be used to be the vessel for the character to come through. And then we get on set if we've done all that prep, and if we're lucky enough to have someone like Lin-Manuel as a director, and the time that is afforded for a film of this nature, and then just get to play and let things happen and not plan. And for me, it was like I got onto set and I just kind of, after all that preparation, I kind of just said to John, follow your impulses and I will follow, like it got to that point where I was able to just say, I will let you come through me. I want you to come through me, because, and he showed up in more ways than I can even begin to express. There was something very profound that happened during this shoot.
I mean, I know that you've obviously played real people before. You've received an Oscar nomination for it. You've just this year alone, you've played 2 real people. Do you feel an extra responsibility? I'm sure with Jonathan, because he was so beloved, but anytime you're playing someone who, really lived and breathed, even if it's Jim Baker, do you feel a responsibility to them?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think I think you want to treat every character you're playing as if they are flesh and blood, right? And I think that is the responsibility that we take upon ourselves as actors. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't, there's no escaping it when it's someone that has lived and breathed, and someone who is living and breathing still, like someone like Jim Baker. But even so, like I'm working on something right now and I'm playing a fictional character. But I went and did some research, and I met someone who has had the exact same experience of the character that I'm playing now. And that just immediately enlivened me. It was like, oh my God, I want this person to feel represented properly in all of their dimension when they watch this show. Like I want them to go, okay, I feel seen. And yeah, it's a beautiful responsibility that I think we have as actors, to reflect back humanity, to reflect back what it is to be a person. And yeah, of course, it gets very, very intense when you're playing someone who did actually live and breathe, and they have remaining relatives there. As I say, like with Julie on set, it was a double-edged sword. It was all at once just incredibly invigorating and inspiring, and it had the potential of kind of making me get self-conscious in a way that wasn't going to be ultimately of service to John, because John was not self-conscious in any way, shape, or form. He was this free, wild, loose, kind of radical, pure creative, full of abandon. And so that was very, very important for me to give myself permission to allow John to be all of those things that he was. Turned up to an 11 all the time, not concerned with hurting your feelings, not, will go for truth above all else. That is a wonderfully inspiring person to, be in the skin of.
Now, I'm someone who, whenever I see actors portraying real people, whether they're iconic or not that well known, I don't care that much about physical resemblance. I care more about, capturing the spirit of the person. However, they didn't do anything extensive to you. You're not wearing prosthetics, anything like that. but you really look like him in some of these scenes, just with the hair and just.
Yeah.
From what I understand, that joyfulness comes through, like his body, your body is like electrified. For people who knew Jonathan, was it ever strange for them to see you?
I've only received nice notes from people that were friends with Jonathan and that knew Jonathan. It's only been thank you for giving my friend more life, and thank you for like letting me meet my friend again, and that's been like the highest praise possible. But to be honest, I'm with you. Like it's an essence. You're looking to express an essence and a soul more than and of course the physical stuff is incredibly important and fun as well. With John, I think there wasn't a huge leap for me, like in the sense we're both theater nerds and we're both kind of exuberant, expressive people for the most part when we're not exhausted. And the hair was an incredibly fun little add-on, and it kind of gave me a lot actually.
Yeah.
And we're both Jews and we kind of look Jewish. we look like long lost Jewish brothers. So I don't feel I feel not very far removed from John in certain ways. He does feel like an ancestor to me. He does feel like a long lost brother. So, but yeah, it was very important to me that his energy and his freedom and how he used his body, like to get very, very specific, there was, if I can give an example, and there's only a little piece of it in the film, but we shot the whole song just in case. And it's that sequence for Play Game, which is Tariq
Mm.
Trotter. And then they brilliantly cut back, Tariq just being the greatest MC alive. And then they cut for the last little line back to John on stage with his pink sideways baseball hat being the whitest man alive. And like that, like the way he moved in that when he was doing it on stage, you can all go and watch it if you feel like it on YouTube. You can Google it, Boho Days John Larson, you'll see him doing Play Game. And that was really important for me to get all of his very awkward, kind of fully committed, like just like passionate white man physicality. Like, yeah, that was definitely fun. Yeah.
This film has such an amazing cast. You have people like Robin De Jesus, who plays Michael, Alexandra Shipp, who I wasn't familiar with, who plays Susan. She's so great. Of course, Bradley Whitford just. I never knew how much he could look like Stephen Sondheim. What was it like to just show up every day and have this amazing support system of actors?
Oh my God, it was a proper company, it was a proper community. And yeah, Judith Light and Vanessa Hudgens and Josh Henry and then of course all these legends that came and played with Sunday. And it was, every single role was filled with someone with incredibly unique gifts. You look at the scene at the party and then you look at the scene where the focus group, which is populated with incredible musical theater genius. And every day was just a pure joy for me, because I obviously am in pretty much every scene, but every day I got to be collaborating with the best of the best of film and musical theater. And it was like I was carried, like my energy was and also it was just incredibly inspiring. But yeah, and it was a community. There was no hierarchy. It was just a pure, like, your success is my success, and if you're struggling, I'm struggling, and how do we all rise together? And also, just again, and this comes from Lynn, but also John. Like, John was the North Star. We were all there to honor John. And when there's that purity of intention, when there's that one thing that everyone is like traveling towards, there's no room for anyone to have an egotistical moment. It's all for this, in service to this artist, to art itself, to an artist that was a symbol of living a life in art that we all want to live. So it went even beyond John. It's about art and creativity and living a good life. And these were the questions that he was wrestling with in Tick Tick Boom: is how do we live a life that we can be at the end of and be proud of, and look back and go, yes, I sang as much of my particular note as I possibly could. I was my note as much as I could be. And I just find that really, that was what everyone showed up with. There was a real kind of like church feeling that we were all on the same spiritual path together in the church of art, in the church of John Larson.
It's so funny watching this movie with a group of theater kids because every 5 seconds you hear someone going, "Oh my God," or like pointing. And obviously the Sunday number is the epitome of that. And you know, you have Cheetah Rivera and
Yeah.
you have everyone. Me personally, Andre DeShields
Oh.
is like my hero. Was there someone for you that day that like you couldn't get over that they were there?
So many, I mean, every single one. And then it all ultimately leads back to Bernadette Peters.
Right?
And that moment where I get to be the channel of expression of the entire Broadway community's love for this person, for this artist, for this legend, genius, in that moment where I get to bring her to the front of the stage and just put my hands on my heart and bow and just kind of try to do justice to what she's given us. That was, you know, maybe my favorite moment of the whole damn thing, you know.
That's amazing. And your scenes with Robin as Michael are so fantastic and kind of similar to Scott in Finance. I love that, you know, that Michael is someone who is like, I don't, you know, I can do something else and
Right.
I'm okay, but Jonathan has to do this. And I think that's so important to tell people, you know, that sometimes there's more than one way. And he's really good at advertising and he seems to like it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
he
just have
wants to be
such, yeah,
comfortable.
yeah, it's like it felt it was so nice to see that in a movie instead of like being told he was a sellout, you know?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no,
Um,
totally. And Robin is just one of those remarkable actors where you immediately like when he came in the screen test, it was like, oh, I love this person. I don't know why, but I love this person. Like his heart is just bursting out of him. It just like he emanates. He's just gushy, you know. And I just want to kind of like, so I think that is the foundation for our relationship. And you know, Robin's talked about this a lot in press and stuff, and and it's something that is really a kind of cool thing that he noticed, which is, you know, so we discovered in rehearsals that this was the parallel love story that
yeah.
Michael and John and John and Susan, like two love stories happening simultaneously and equally vital. And then you know, Robin always comments, he's like, you know, you don't often get to see a relationship between a cis white heterosexual man and a cis, you know, homosexual man played out on screen in a way that is full of physical affection, full of kind of deep comfort with each other, and where there's no even thought about any kind of discomfort.
Yeah.
It's just a very pure, loving two people that just fucking love each other, and sexuality and skin color become you know, these things that are celebrated only, rather than made in any way a threat. It's something that I think is really worth kind of noting. Going, yeah, that's a very, very cool thing. And you know, it's down to Robin being such a heart-centered actor. And yeah, and you know, yeah, I think it's a wonderful way to portray the character as well, and how Lynn has framed that character in the film, and all of the characters. There's a sympathy for everyone's situation, and John is just insane enough to carry on banging his head against his dream. Thank God, because he was meant to.
Yep. And obviously, despite the tragedy of his passing, it's such a joyous film. And you said that, you know, it was very joyful to make, but you are singing and dancing for the first time. You're working during COVID. There is some, you know, very serious material. What was the most challenging part of making the film or playing Jonathan?
Oh wow, it's so interesting because challenging wouldn't be the right word. It was a joy. It was a joy, like every morning to be, as I say, to be able to wake up and devote myself at the altar of Jonathan Larson, just give myself fully, every cell in my being to him, and to allow him to have more life. If there was a challenge, it would be to get out of the way and just to allow him to be there, to allow him to come through. I mean, yes, the choreography of therapy threw my neck out, yes. But look at that number. It's so fantastic. It's so worth it. Ryan Heffington, such an incredible choreographer and just insane, you know, mad scientist brilliance. And then, you know, the singing was the thing that I felt most vulnerable about, because it was something that I hadn't done before.
Mhm.
And I knew that it needed to honor the way that John sung, which was to the back row of the galaxy. And I knew that I had to get to the point where I could sing with all that passion and all of that love and all of that confidence, so that I could do justice to his work and his words and his notes. So that was maybe the most challenging thing, but it was also the thing that was most galvanizing for me and the most inspiring, because I knew I had a distance to travel, and it got me off my butt, and it put me on my toes, and it meant it put me in the position where I had to work, you know, pretty devotedly throughout the process, which I'm forever grateful for.
Well, it's such a beautiful movie. It is so special. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your process with your fellow artists. Again, congratulations on the movie. Everyone watching at home, it's on Netflix, so you can watch it again and again, as I suspect many of you have. Thank you so, so much for being here today.
Thank you, Janelle. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is fun. Thank you.